lot of data in the GIS. The travel performance, what that is the TSP report had that no build. Well, now we're starting to look at the build. So we start plugging in these corridors as far as, well, what do we kind of see this corridor doing to the travel performance of the area? And so that's what we do with all of these alternatives. We do have all 80 that we looked at. And so what we did, and we tried to explain within the PowerPoint, is that, well, there are some alternatives that went through environmentally sensitive areas like Medeoin or through town centers such as Manhattan. So what we tried to do was we tried to, rather than just throw out the entire corridor, because it hit almost a fatal flaw, we said, well, what was the intent? To go south of Manhattan, to go north of Manhattan? So we started looking at these bands, and those are the 8 that you see, as far as new corridor and new alignment. And there was also 2 arterials that were suggested as well. So that's really where we're at today, but we'll go through the entire process again for any alternatives that were suggested tonight.
And through January 4th.
Through January.
Well, I almost gave that answer, but is today the last chance to submit alternatives?
We're accepting alternatives through January 4th. This process, Tier 1 is anticipated to be completed by the end of next year, with Tier 2 by 2014. So, what you see is that 2,000-foot bandwidth. That's really where we're looking at a new corridor on new alignment, or a new mode on new alignment. Where in arterial type improvement, we're looking at about a 200-foot working alignment. In Tier 2, we start really honing in on where that working alignment is, because we start doing the field data next year. So I think throughout this entire process, there will be tweaks, but what we're trying to get out of Tier 1 is the what is it and where is it. So we're trying to determine which corridors, which best balances those needs of a transportation performance and environmental impacts. The next step that we need to do is we need to further evaluate all of the ones that were suggested tonight, along with all the ones that we already have. We'd like to look at all of the environmental impacts, look at all of the travel performance measures, look at the financial viability, look at tolling, and then look at how well these fit with the community's visions within this region. So we'd like to carry this forward into next year, but tonight we're just trying to establish that range. Have we looked at everything? Have we looked at all of these alternatives? And that's what we're trying to do tonight and through the 4th.
What is a public-private partnership, or P3?
I'll take the P3 question. A public-private partnership, there's a couple of them that there's one I believe that exists right now in Illinois at the Skyway. We have the Indiana Toll Road, which was leased to a private company who operates and maintains that. They collect tolls on that as well. But there's a public-private partnership can mean many, many things. Kind of the wide range of what most people think of for a P3, as you'll hear it referred to, is a scenario where a private company comes in, they design it, they build it, they finance it, they operate it, and they maintain it. And that's kind of the full spectrum of a P3. But a P3 can be as little as a build and finance, where we provide 100% design, and then they would finance it, and then that could be paid back with availability payments over time. So that's kind of the full spectrum, and then there's multiple variations of that in between those 2 different scenarios. And this could wind up being any of those if a P3 option is used.
How can I obtain the information that's been presented at tonight's meeting?
You can go at tonight's meeting. It's at illianacorridor.org, along with other brochures that you see out front. Those are also online. The PowerPoint should be online by tomorrow. all those, the CPG meetings that were mentioned over there, all the meeting summaries are there. Those are also open meetings. There's a calendar to explain when those are. I think you saw in the calendar, we're trying to get to around a March timeframe for the next public meeting to kind of start narrowing that range that you see here and start showing the results of those evaluation procedures.
Okay, one last question here tonight is, what info can we expect at the spring forum that will be significantly different from tonight's meeting?
Well, in spring, we hope to kind of start narrowing that range down. We can start with the full range, and then we start looking at, well, what's the best travel performance? What's the least impacting? What has that best balance? Then we hope to start pulling together, well, what's the cost of all these corridors? What are how do we go ahead and get these things built? So that's really towards the spring. And then in the summer, we hope to have that recommended alternative. So we hope to get down to 1 or 2 or 3 alternatives by summer.
If you don't mind, I'd like to add that one big difference will be as we run the toll scenarios for these different alternatives, that can have a real big impact on what kind of traffic uses these corridors. So the results that we've been presenting today are for freeways or limited access freeways and arterial highway, but the tollway scenarios can change that quite a bit. You know, if you put a toll on there, people might divert off of that and take I-80 or 65 rather than use this. So that's one big difference. The other thing I think is going to be very important for us is this is the first time we're really rolling all this out publicly, and there's a great deal throughout this project. We've relied very heavily on the public's input because it is such a broad area and everybody's got their own community plans. So we're going to learn a lot over the next couple of months listening to your comments back about what's meeting your community's plans.
Are there any other cards? I don't think Dave, Kara, or do you need? Okay. How wide will the corridor be?
Right now, as we said, we are studying and trying to look at a 2,000-foot wide corridor, and this is for the initial study that we're doing in Tier 1. And while we're doing that, there may be areas that we actually narrow that down even during Tier 1, depending on restrictions that we might come up on as we're doing the study. When we look at in Tier 2, it'll be narrowed down to a 400-foot study area. Once we actually get to constructing a corridor on the new alignment type of corridors, that could potentially be narrowed down even further. Many of our new roads in flatter terrain type areas where you don't have a lot of hills that you have wider fill sections for, frequently we can do those with 200 to 200 feet. But again, depending on what our final corridor winds up being, we don't have the full, all of the modes that are going to be involved yet. And so until all that's determined, we really can't determine that final footprint. But that's why we're leaving and saying that 400 feet right now is our goal, what we intend to look at for Tier 2, knowing that when we build it could wind up being narrower than that. The arterial solutions, like I'm saying, right now we're looking at a working alignment of 200 feet, knowing there's potential to go less than that at that point as well.